Professor Whitty, you've talked at the start of the very first pandemic when we heard about it, about how the whole plan is population risk reduction. So washing your hands is easy to implement and has a big reduction. Mask wearing is the next level. Do you have a strategy on each of those implementations regarding how much risk it reduces? So do we know hand washing reduces by, say, 10%, mask wearing 5%?
No, and I think the problem is there's lots of numbers on these bandied about. The problem actually is that really what you have is different combinations of things you can do, each one of which interacts differently with the others. So if you just take it in isolation, you would never say and randomise one group to have a face mask, another group to have hand washing, and another group to open the windows. What you're actually going to say in reality is do the whole lot, because these all build on one another and they change. Different ones affect different bits of the risk. So the hand washing is about things you might pick up by touching because someone's coughed on a table or something, whereas opening the windows is particularly important for anything that's aerosol, for example. So I think what we would all say is all of these are moderate impact of things incrementally, but if you put them all together, much larger. But do all of them because what they help do is they protect you against different elements of the risk, which are surrounding you: the droplet, the aerosol, the fomite on the table.
So, Professor Whitty, you've beaten me to it because that's where I was going. Because I know it's for the ministers and the Prime Minister to decide what to do, but how is the data presented over which combination you put in place? For example, we could have chosen to have the rule of 6 return. We could have gone into tiers again. We could have actually closed clubs or pubs. How is it decided which constellation comes together?
Well, I think that in a sense, and I'm going to simplify what is obviously an extremely complicated and difficult process for ministers. But I mean, the first layer is, okay, what are the things that we can do that have no obvious downside socially or economically? Saying to someone, wash your hands, put a face mask on, open the windows when you can, has absolutely no downsides. Why would you not say it? So first question is, can we actually get through this just with those? Then there are some things which actually have a bit more impact socially and economically, and they very much, government has to take a view on that because they're having to balance things. Next level up is clearly things like advising working from home, as government has done. It's not in law, but it is in guidance, and things like you must wear a face mask rather than we would really like you to. And then obviously you then go up a ladder of intervention. Each step of the ladder adds some protection, but as you go up the ladder, the impact on society or the economy gets greater. And the difficult decision for the ministers is essentially how far up that ladder at any point in time should they decide to go. And that very much is the way I would conceptualize it.
That's very helpful. And now we've got the context of why the vaccines are so important. We've got the way in which you can deal with it for the general population. One of the biggest problems facing us in the future is the fact that there are about 10% of the population who currently aren't vaccinated. And the current first vaccine rate, to have your first vaccine, is about 20,000, 22,000 over a 7-day average. So we have a problem with society. How do we deal with the 10% or 5%, whatever it turns out to be, of people who won't get vaccinated, given all the context you've given to all the other questions, and now we know about the importance of the vaccine, but for those 5 to 10%, medically, what is your sort of response of how we could deal with that? What are the options that you would present in front of government?
Yeah, critical question. So I think there's a very small number of people, and they're very noisy, but they are very small, who basically, due to weird conspiracy theories and all sorts, are just simply never going to get vaccinated. And except where they work in places where there are lots of vulnerable people, the view of government is fine. You just got to accept that. But of the 10%, a very large portion of those just haven't got round to it. And that's really the people you're addressing your question to, in a sense. And I think that there are basically 4 things people want to know and that we have to do and make sure are culturally relevant as well. And that doesn't just mean ethnically, culturally. I mean, making sure every bit in society feels that we're talking directly to them in a way that they feel comfortable with and trusting of. First thing is they want to know that the disease is a big enough threat that it's actually worth doing anything at all. That's a really critical thing. Secondly, they want to know that the vaccines actually work. And on both of those, we have incredibly good evidence. We know that this is a big threat, and we know that the vaccines do work. The third thing is they'd want to know that the side effects are proportionate to the benefit that the vaccine's giving them. That one we have to keep on going at, because there are huge numbers of myths out there. These are not people who believe them who are anti-vaxxers. The anti-vaxxers start them, but they're not. But the people who believe them, they just read something on the internet, they're worried, and they need to have serious information put to them. And the final thing is we need to make it convenient. Convenience makes a very big difference. I found it very striking when I was last on the wards that the people who I spoke to who not had vaccines, who were disproportionately there, unsurprisingly, an awful lot of them said, I hadn't got round to it yet. It wasn't that there were a few of them you'd meet who just believed all sorts of nonsense. But the great majority, it was I hadn't got round to it yet. And it's that combination of making sure that their fears are correctly and politely and scientifically addressed, and we make it as convenient for them as possible. And my hope is that this huge boosting campaign that's going on at the moment also gives people an opportunity who've not had their first vaccine or haven't had their second one to come back and actually say, look, the threat has gone up again. Now is a really good time to get my first or second vaccine, and obviously for everybody else to get a booster.
That's really helpful. My final question is to Dr. Waite. One of the things the CMOs have agreed is to suspend the 15-minute wait post-Pfizer for boosters. Are there any other things that you are looking at that may well help the throughput, given how important we've just heard it is to get those boosters, given that convenience seems to be the main thing? What is government looking at doing practically from your position that may well make a difference to making the booster programme as successful as possible?
Thanks, Dr. Evans. I mean, you've touched on one of the really key things there, which is that by suspending the 15-minute wait, you can get an awful lot more patients through any given clinic. That applies not just to the very large vaccine centres, but also I've had the privilege of working in quite a few community pharmacies during the booster campaign. It makes a real difference there because there's really only a limited number of places that people can sit to wait. So that's a great big plus one. I'm not